Hi everybody, I'm Scott Allen Miller. Today on Sam IT, I'm going to answer the question of what is ghost ship software, or what are ghost ship projects? We use this term, and this is one that comes from me, so if you've seen it, this is, as far as I know, I'm the originator of this a few years ago. The concept is, and we see this a lot in software, that a company will develop a product, probably software, but it could apply to hardware, and they put in all of their effort up front, and this is way more common than people realize, and we spot this all the time in the behavior of companies and products within IT, because IT gets exposed to this in important ways. What happens is a company puts in lots and lots of resources when a new product has been announced. They will hire a development team and engineers, and they will work really hard and build a product. Once that product is built, they don't really need all of those people anymore, and either move them to other projects or, more likely, let them go. In fact, in many cases, companies will outsource this and never have had the staff that created their own products ever on board. Once this is done and they have a working product, they then go to marketing and sales and start getting out there and gaining customers. They may retain someone who does some patching and fixes features that are broken and just makes sure that things work. Over time, even the need for that will go down, and that person may disappear as well. What we end up with, and certainly not all companies do this, but way more do than you think, and it is especially a problem with closed source software. Open source software has a natural protection against ghost shipping, so we generally don't have to worry about it. You may have abandoned open source projects, of course, but once they're abandoned, it generally means there was no audience for them anyway, and it doesn't really matter. But with closed source software, the abandonment of creating it, the abandonment of engineers, is not in any way influenced by the number of customers or the interest or even the revenue from customers. So because engineering is extremely expensive, and companies generally want to hire lots of people and get it done quickly, and they generally don't have the expertise to even hire and oversee those people internally, let alone maintain them all the time, it's often done in a very ad hoc or outsourced way. Over time, this becomes a pretty big problem, because in the first year or two, the product is still new and people still see it as new and features are all still being discovered. But after 5 years or 10 years, you start having a product that's running on really old technology. It may not be able to be deployed properly to new systems. Underlying components may have been deprecated or not patched anymore. You may have security concerns that have come up either because of changes of underlying components or changes to the market. You may have all kinds of things start to go wrong. And we can generally recognize this because software will stop innovating, it'll stop adapting, it'll stop changing in any way. When you're looking at products and they tell you that, well, they only work on this old version of an operating system, or they require this old component, or they do something that's really awkward and limiting for no reason, like they only run on a really expensive database, but you would never need one from a technology standpoint. It's just that they're stuck with a decision made long ago. Chances are this was all because a product was rushed to market, and the people who are needed to make what are probably trivial changes don't exist. And the company either doesn't want to invest or can't invest in many cases in keeping their product alive. This is risky for you as a customer because it means you are paying for software that the vendor may not have any ability to maintain and protect. When you first buy it, they may be able to get it installed for you and working, possibly with lots of caveats and limitations. That's often the case. But the way that they operate and the thing that makes them seem like they're viable is that to an individual customer, they purchase the product, the company makes sure that they get it installed and that it's working. And then, if there's a problem down the road, the company either manages to fix it by whatever means possible, or if they don't, they just refund the money or walk away. This works because mostly customers don't talk to each other, and each customer will assume that they're the only one that this happened to. Or they won't go public with it because it makes them look bad too for having chosen a vendor that clearly couldn't support their own software. So there isn't a lot of incentive for people to go out and say, I bought this really odd little program from a company you don't know, but they treated me badly, or they couldn't get it installed initially. It's not the kind of thing that actually happens. The company can take really big risks in pushing out these kinds of products because when a new customer comes on board, if they get it to work, they get paid. And if they don't get it to work, they simply don't charge the customer, and they're not in any kind of legal hot water, even though there's no way for them to support or maintain the software in the future. Their risks as a software company are generally protected by the fact that it's closed source and the customers can't prove that it's not being maintained, and they can't prove that there's no developers on staff. And so since they can't prove those things and they can't see changes going into a change management system, it is all kept at arm's length from them, and the chances that they would even suspect that someone would be running a company where there's salespeople and marketing people and a website and people that pick up the phone, but not a single person who can maintain or even knows how the software works and doesn't know if it's patched or safe, it doesn't occur to people because they don't think of those companies in that empathetic way. In reality, this is the common way that it happens. Most software, not most big software, when you're talking about companies like Microsoft or Oracle or whatever, they have non-stop development teams that never go away because they make software. They make software every day. But the average piece of closed source software out there is nothing like those. They are small products made by small companies, often that a creator had a single idea. That person didn't come from a software engineering background, but instead came from some market vertical or something similar, had a product idea, got together a team to build it, gave up all of their savings or got investors to get through that initial hump of building the first product, and now has to make their money off of operational expenses, which they may do fine with, but being able to afford the engineers who they needed for 6 months or a year to make the initial product, to keep them around forever would be extremely expensive, and if their product isn't continuously growing, they may not be able to afford it at all because those people are much more expensive and much less visible than the salespeople. In reality, if they took the same money and invested it all in the sales and marketing, even a product that is decaying and has no ability to operate in the future will still make more money by investing in sales of it and getting customers to buy it, even though they think they're getting support that they're not. This is why we call it ghost ship software, because the ship is built and operated initially. Then all of the crew is removed, or dies in the ghost ship scenario, but it refers to people who've abandoned ship. And then the ship just drifts indefinitely until it crashes and sinks. Out in the actual real world in the ocean, there are ghost ships all over the place. They drift around and eventually they sink or run aground. And this is exactly what this software is like. It's set adrift, it is left to its own devices, and at some point, all software will sink because software needs to be a living thing. Even really simple utilities can't go indefinitely without being maintained. Eventually, if nothing else, they will not be able to be installed anymore. But at some point, you'll run into problems like you can no longer compile it, or underlying components are no longer available. Or, and this is a topic for another video, you end up relying on components that are not supported, which brings in the question of what does it even mean to be deployable if you can't be deployed on a system that's deployable? That becomes a really weird question because lots of software out there in the real world has that dependency, where they say they support their software, but only in an unsupportable scenario, so that no matter what you do or what you pay for, there is always a reason to be able to point and say, well, you're running on an unsupported operating system, you're running on an unsupported database, but in order to use that software, only unsupported options exist. Or, in slightly more common scenarios, only questionably supportable options exist, such as very old, nearing end-of-life systems, or questionable quality systems, or systems that were never meant for production enterprise use, such as hobby-class systems may be the only way to deploy. Lots of problems like this exist, but the ghost ship software thing is extremely real, extremely common, and something that when I talk to small businesses, they are crippled by these all the time, but very rarely identify that this is the problem. They'll talk about software and how hard it is to get support and how limited their deployment scenarios are and how antiquated everything is and how they can't get answers and no one will ever make changes. Generally, this can all be explained by the fact that the software has ghost shipped and there is no engineering team, there's probably no engineer at all who's able to open the code and make any changes. Now, of course, they probably own the code still, although that as well may be a problem. In some of these cases, these companies will have actually lost the original code, probably lost the original documentation, and have absolutely no idea how to work with it. And they could go out and hire either a new staff or outsource it to get the work done, but the cost of doing so is often so high it's worth losing a huge number of their customers rather than to do so, especially because losing customers is a known cost, but having an engineering team try to fix the software is an unknown cost that could spiral out of control very quickly, and they'd still be beholden to the customers, and if their engineering didn't work out, they would lose those customers still, making the potential risk of actually fixing the software easily far worse than just giving up a lot of their customers. Even large percentages, 50% of their customers, could easily, in many of these cases, be much safer and cheaper than trying to do the right thing for those customers. In almost all cases where software has ghost shipped, it is cheaper for the original company to start over. Either to go out of business and start a new company, just go out of business and go away, or to hire and go through the process of funding an entire new build process in order to replace the old, because it is so costly in general to maintain old software that it would actually be easier to start the entire thing over, which is extremely dangerous, as you can imagine, for a company to have to start from scratch, create a product at nearly all the same cost that they did the first time, but this time competing against their own old code base in order to get new customers. So they would almost, if they weren't making tons of money on the old system, it almost certainly guarantees that they can't justify doing it with the new, which is why a lot of software companies go through only a very limited number of cycles of keeping their software up to date, often only as long as they can maintain the original engineering team, and when that has passed, they simply go out of business, and that's it. And it's actually in their initial design, even if they don't articulate it, that they basically designed the company with the intent of putting all their engineering in the front months or years, and then slowly having the software decay over time, and just charging customers for their ghost ship software until such time as the ship completely sinks. And once that happens, they simply close down the business, leave anyone who still has an open support contract with no one to go after, and collect whatever revenue there has been over the last 2 or 5 or 20 years, and walk away. That's the plan almost always from the beginning. And so for you as a customer to put your faith and trust and investment into a product like this, where there may be absolutely no one in the entire world who knows how to support that software in case something actually goes wrong, because the only real recourse you generally ever have against a software company is at best getting your money back. And even that would be extremely hard, especially if they went out of business, or if you had used it for any amount of time before it started having problems. You may even struggle to get your cost of the software back, leaving you with a large investment, often many times the size of the cost of the software itself, that you may be on the hook for because you've put all your data into it and you desperately need it out to be able to work for your own customers, and there's simply nothing that you can do. And because the products are closed source, you don't even have the legal right to bring in your own engineers to open up the product and try to maintain it yourself. So there's just a huge amount of risk in ghost ship software, and it's something that every company needs to be aware of, understand its risks, understand how to spot it, understand how to mitigate the risks of it, and make sure that they're always taking into account whether software is ghost shipped, is at risk of being ghost shipped, or just has the potential that it could happen somewhere down the road, and build that into all buying decisions. And that's one of the main reasons, or one of the key reasons, why IT can never be left out of any decision on software acquisition, because only IT has any real insight into whether these things are actually happening. Please remember to like and subscribe, put your comments in the area below. Definitely, I want to know about ghost ship software that you have seen and dealt with, or you are suspicious that you may have, or maybe you've avoided buying, or just know that someone else has gotten. It would be a great thing to discuss. And of course, there's partially ghost shipped software as well. It is very common, even for some really large mainstream products. Again, not professional companies like Microsoft, but there are ones that are pretty well known who have products that have so much development from 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that even though they keep updating little things and making the interface look new, those roles are really trivial compared to the hardcore back-end database and business logic pieces, and they have ghost shipped the core of their application, but they're maintaining a facade of updates so that it's very, very difficult to point to them and say, well, there's certainly a danger here that they can't support their own software. even though it actually exists. So some companies have actually built infrastructures around hiding this exact phenomenon because they have identified it internally, but want to be able to keep their customers from identifying it. And so there's some pretty good strategies for that, which are kind of nasty. And if you want to sponsor us, as always, you can do so on Patreon. I will put the link in the description below. This episode of Sam IT has been sponsored by our friends at Talkadillo, the affordable, simple, fully managed, predictably priced VoIP PBX platform. Learn more at talkadillo.com and help to support Sam IT.